everyone. Ariel Adams here with Superlative Podcast. Please listen to aBlogtoWatch's other podcast, aBlogtoWatch Weekly, where we talk about the latest watch news and reviews. Today on the Superlative Podcast, my guest is Alfred Lung. Alfred is a watch writer and collector based in Hong Kong. He's worked with aBlogtoWatch, and he's been covering the industry for a while. Alfred, welcome.
Hi, Ariel. It's been a while, and I'm flattered to be here.
Yeah, we've talked about this for a while. I was actually surprised that you had not been on the show already, but you're here now, and that's good. We've always had some of the best conversations about watches, so it's only natural that we take the conversation to the audience. I guess the first thing which is interesting to me is you're in Hong Kong. It's a market which has really gone crazy ups, crazy downs. The first thing I want to know is right now, what is going on with the Hong Kong watch market? What is the current status quo?
I have been in a very close relationship with a lot of watch collectors and watch retailers, anyone to do with watches in my region, Hong Kong, China, and sometimes Southeast Asia, as far as South Korea. Actually, the market has slowed down quite dramatically for various reasons. And to my surprise as well, sometimes it feels like that people have been less and less interested into watches myself, even though I think the brands that rolling out the new watches for the last couple of years has not been so exciting as far as the watch collectors is concerned. And the retail is suffering. In fact, the whole luxury market has been suffering, not just watches.
I think, we talk about Hong Kong a lot in the watch hobbyist space, and Hong Kong is no longer what it used to be. So I think it merits repeating a little bit about what Hong Kong was. And I want to hear some of your thoughts about it as well, but I'll give sort of my story. Hong Kong, for lack of a better term, was a non-Swiss shrine to watches, right? And they did it better than I think, you could have been done in Switzerland. The city was not just a place to buy watches. It was a place to see watches, to wear watches, to trade watches and buy watches at all times of day, in any condition, of any value. Speed was important. Value was important. Accessibility was important. You could get anything you wanted for a good price in Hong Kong. And it was a very, very special place to go. A lot of people that I knew became watch lovers by going to Hong Kong and just like seeing all the stores and being in it. Like, oh my God, I got to get into this hobby. So why was Hong Kong so special? Not only was it the amount of wealthy people there, but the status of the city as being a hub for finances, a favorable tax regime, a lot of things just made it really, really great. And so if you were a watch lover, you knew about Hong Kong, you had to go to Hong Kong, you wanted to return to Hong Kong as often as possible to get a sense of it. And since China took over fully, and after the pandemic, I think those are the two things that had the biggest effect. And I don't think that it would ever be fair to say that Hong Kong will not be a watch city. I think as long as you and I are alive, Hong Kong will be a watch city. But it's not the same place for the amount of activity, for the amount of people from different places coming with their money, the amount of freedom. What am I missing, and what would you add?
Well, first of all, in history, for the watch lovers, I think the most important thing for Hong Kong really is the tax-free issues. And basically, luxury goods, watches can go in and out of Hong Kong very, very easily. So no matter which country it comes from, if you're working in Hong Kong, let's say you are working in the US and you got a headquarter order that you should come and work to Hong Kong for another 2-3 years. You can bring your watches in Hong Kong without declaring anything at that time, and it's absolutely fine. And that's why watches can come in and out quite easily. And then you bring your watches in, and naturally, because lots of people do that, so the quantity of watches is massive. So as you said, trading of watches is also a big pattern in Hong Kong, mostly dominated by Rolex. A lot of people know Rolex because in the Chinese saying, you should have a Rolex. You work for Rolex, basically. And what happens is people know the Rolex prices really well. So that become a big thing for the Hong Kong working class people. So people know about these watches. And then so it becomes a symbolic thing that you should have when you work your socks off for your job. So people know about prices. So we bring your watches in, you want to trade them. Okay, they know their prices, especially for Rolex. So, and which is a major brand anyway. So it becomes very, very easy to go in and out. What has really changed in why? Actually, I should go back to why it has grown so dramatically. Well, the information, the growth of the internet, and also the media in China suddenly becomes a boom. And people from China, before they were less aware of luxury watches, I would say, and then become more and more aware of the watches, and then they suddenly, before they didn't know any even sports model for Rolex. They're not a favorite. It's not their favorite thing, and suddenly they know about it, and then start to collecting. And then, in Hong Kong, when you buy, even go to the authorized retailers of Rolex at that time, you can have a little bit of a price advantage on even on Rolex. And suddenly the discount getting less and less, and it runs into a premium because the demand gets so high. And this is due to also the opening up of the visa-free, or you can sign up to come to Hong Kong multiple times and do shopping. And that's why the luxury market has grown very fast, very, very fast. In fact, this came back to the fall down of Lehman Brothers, because the stock market fall down quite dramatically. And what the central government or China did was open up the cities for allowing more more cities for citizens from China to come down to Hong Kong to do the shopping. And that's why the luxury business in general has grown quite dramatically. In fact, it has climb up every year, with the Swiss watch imported to Hong Kong getting larger and larger and larger. Okay, the game has really changed during COVID, because the strategy that we have for COVID for the Chinese government, and in fact Hong Kong was trying to adopt the same to close the door. So what happens is all of a sudden, any tourist was very hard to come to Hong Kong, because they just can't get in. There are very strict quarantine issues. And then what happens is the Chinese shoppers, of course, they don't come in they only come in for business if they have to, because the quarantine can be as long as 21 days. So what happens is they start to consume local consumptions. They start to travel around China. They don't need, because that's actually free. You don't need to have a special visa or vaccine. Everyone is vaccinated in China anyway, but so you don't need to have like a quarantine when you travel to another city in China at that time when it starts to open up. So the spending pattern of China for the Chinese has changed. So they actually look for what they call luxury. The definition of luxury has changed for them. Before, they try to have something which is nice, expensive. So they buy some of the Chinese tycoons. They want to buy tourbillon. They want to buy mini repeater, because it's just the best thing that they have on the wrist. But now they think, okay, if I can travel within China, have some time with the family, and traveling, with a nice electrical vehicle they have, and that's fine. So they have changed the pattern. That's probably the reason why. Even though nowadays Hong Kong are welcoming Chinese tourists coming to Hong Kong to visit, and the amount of money they spend is no longer the same. That's why the luxury watch business has gone down. And as far as I understand, it has something to do with crypto as well. Because during COVID, I think the late COVID stage, there was like a trend of the metaverse and then the NFT, this type of thing, and these things has actually, the bubble has burst as well. That has actually something to do with the watch, cost of luxury watch to gone down consumptions dramatically in my region as well.
Thank you for sharing that, Alfred. I think what's important to say is that there's really no one thing, no one factor which has made the Hong Kong market go down. It's actually a series of things that happen for different reasons, some of them intentional, some accidentally. And I keep asking myself, I'm not just interested in the potential of Hong Kong to bounce back, because Alfred, I want it to, even though I don't know if that's going to happen. But, I wonder, is it just the disposable income of mainly Chinese tourists? Meaning, if they had more money to spend, would they be buying more luxury watches? Is it partially the government saying, buy locally made things? And we know in general in China, there's been a push to buy local goods, even local luxury goods. Is that part of it? Is it, as you said, just complete inconvenience of going to Hong Kong? I know that it wasn't just Chinese, of course. There's people from other countries going to Hong Kong. I wonder if changes in the watch market itself have done it. But what we're realizing as we're discussing this is that even though there's been a dramatic downturn in Hong Kong during a relatively short amount of time, it's not related to one thing. It's a series of things. And I think what's really, really important about the watch industry, and when we used to go to the shows like Basel World, they would want nothing more than to have us forget the rest of the world. But the reality is that this industry is influenced by geopolitics in such a big way. Consumer emotions and, of course, the money they have and what their desires are and what they're able to do makes such a difference. Like you pointed out, that an inability to travel has a huge impact on the luxury watch market. And that's maybe obvious for people like you and me that are in it. But I just think it's fascinating how nuanced and complicated the market for these timepieces is, in addition to the watches themselves, right?
Oh, to answer that question, as you say, it's a multiple factors that has gone into the reasons. And I actually visited Chengdu and Shenzhen and the Greater Bay Area of China. And there are goods, there are watches that were not easy to get and available at those places. So the brands has been clever as well. They actually imported watches, so-called hot items locally to the local market themselves. And the price difference, they actually, because you have VAT, value-added tax, as well as custom, they have tried to equalize the price with Hong Kong so that the price difference is very little. And sometimes it's not worth the effort to travel to Hong Kong to purchase the watches. So I was in Chengdu, and then I walked into Omega at that time, and they were showing me the brand new novelties that was still not in Hong Kong yet. He said, look, this is brand new. You can get it right now. And because I'm from Hong Kong, and at that time in Chengdu, he said, I can do a D-tax for you. And after D-taxing the process, which is something new in China, D-tax, the
what
price
is that
difference,
exactly?
D-tax basically is like if I'm a Hong Kong guy, I should go to Paris and I do shopping, I can get minus 20. I can get the value-added tax back. So it's the same. They learn from this, and they say if I do go to Chengdu as a Hong Kong citizen, I'm not a China citizen, so I can do D-tax, and then suddenly the price point becomes 1,000 or 2,000 Hong Kong dollars difference. Then if I can get it fast, locally, then I might as well buy in Chengdu, and I don't need to wait. In other, we talk about watches, but sorry, I want to talk just Louis Vuitton store that I went into. I just saw the bag that I bought for my wife, and then he said, "Hey, here's a new color. Only Chengdu has it." And then again, the tax $2,000 difference. I think your wife will be very happy with a new color. So there is a difference. The brands are making it easier to shop in China as well. So that's a difference as well.
Now, that's interesting to me. I knew, of course, the brands want to go where the customers are. So, of course, that makes sense. But my understanding was that China had all these extra taxes on watches and things like that. And you're saying that you can, as a Hong Kong citizen, get around that. Like, I didn't know that a lot of that exists. So you're saying, is that also apply to people that live in those cities, like in China? Because again, so they still have to pay high tax.
They still have to pay high tax, but sometimes as a customer, sometimes waiting time is something that frustrates them. although, from a luxury business, for me, luxury, I want to wait actually, if I see something that is, a nice watch that I really want to buy, I don't mind waiting a few months because the waiting process is something that I really wanted. It's part of my purchasing journey. But however, the game has changed, even 10 years ago, people in the SIHH, I remember, here's the show. And by the way, next week or next month maximum, the watches is in the market. So the consumer behavior changed that way. So going back, as a Chinese citizen, at that time, if I'm in Chengdu, I say, I see these brand new watches that's just rolled out in a marketing campaign and I can get it right away, then I don't mind paying a little bit more, I think, especially we're not talking about a super expensive watch at that time.
What can you say about overall demand for watches in China? Because one of the things that you and I both know from this industry is you get very little information from looking at the official numbers anybody gives. Those are usually a few years behind. And to get a sense of what's going on, you have to talk to retailers, talk to the people buying watches, talk to the people selling watches to sort of get an idea of what's going on. I have always been impressed at the cultural interest amongst many people in the sort of greater China area for watches in general, right? There's just a cultural interest in the object. You don't need to tell people as often, this is why a watch is cool. But a lot of the government policies lately have sort of said, hey, everyone, don't be so into luxury, tone down your expectations, monetarily. And I guess what I'm curious is how that is having an effect on this traditional demand. Of course, none of us wants there to be lower demand for watches, but I'm wondering, is it a resilient desire people have? Is it strong hobby that even if the government says don't be into this, they're still into it? Or is that move by the government actually having a big effect? Because I'm not there, I don't really know what the average, mentality towards luxury watches is. What can you say about that?
Well, in my opinion, getting to know a few Chinese people, in general, the watch demand, for let's say Swiss-made watches, luxury Swiss-made watches in that respect, I think is still very high in that case. They want a decent watch, the decent Swiss watch, Swiss luxury watch. However, whether my debate on this, this category of Swiss-made watches, whether they're satisfied with something which is ultra expensive or something which is a very decent watch, enough for daily use is good enough for them. I want to know, my cousin has been in the Greater Bay, China, running quite a nice, home electrical appliances business. And suddenly he talks to me about Hublot watches.
Okay.
And I was kind of a little bit surprised, of course we talk, he was, a few years ago, he was talking to me about a Longines watch, which I said, yeah, nice brand. And, of course, in Chengdu itself, the demand for Longines is massive. That's why it's widely spread across. But suddenly he talks to me about Hublot and said, I like it. Classic Fusion, Big Bang, either of them. And I'm fascinated by it. Maybe he's watching a little bit of a sports that's covered by Hublot itself, but I believe that the demand for the Swiss-made watches is still there. But however, whether they want to collect themselves, I don't think so at the moment, because there are plenty other choices that they can do with the money they have, and especially the economy you will never find the official numbers for the economy status for China, but I think the economy is not at a very good state. It's the same as Hong Kong and perhaps in the Southeast Asia as well. And, the rest of the Asia is still in a recovery stage in many ways, in my opinion.
I noticed something that the watch industry has done multiple times, and I wonder how many times they'll make this mistake. And they've done it in China a couple of times. I remember more than 10 years ago now, around 2010, 2011, 2012, you started seeing prices of certain things going up very, very high. And my understanding was that they were going up in order to be sold as more expensive things in China, because there apparently was this demand for ever more expensive watches. But the problem is that you start charging so much more for the same product, eventually it gets so silly that no one takes it seriously. And then they had to scale back. And you remember what the brands did is they just stopped a bunch of models and then made a bunch of other models that were less expensive. And then they did it all over again. But instead of doing it just in China and parts of Asia, they started doing this overpricing thing around the world. And now they're at the point where they're like, we've gotten too far. The prices are so far removed from what anyone who used to buy them is willing to spend, and there's no other new pools of people to be buyers. We're stuck. Do you see them doing this cycle sort of over and over again? It's quite self-defeating, but have you noticed this?
If we talk about brands, if I may name, actually, Rolex have raised its retail price quite a few times, quite dramatically. And I remember I have a friendly retailer who gives me the Lefty watch. And I remember when it was launched, I said to him, look, listen, I want to be, if I may, queue for one of the Lefty watch, Rolex, that GMT that I love. And then I just got it recently, and the price has gone up by like 20,000 Hong Kong dollars for the same watch. That's quite a lot, actually.
In what period of time?
And when it was launched, I already started saying to the retailer, listen, I want to be lucky enough to stay in the queue. And I remember at that time it must be like 70-something thousand Hong Kong dollars. And when I purchased it, was 90-something thousand Hong Kong dollars. So it's gone up by, what, 2,000?
That's a few $1,000s.
Yeah, $3,000 US. So it has gone up. And recently, Rolex has raised its retail again. In fact, I think the reason why they do it is maybe the so-called market price actually is at that level. So do I see them repeating the discontinuing expensive models? And actually, what I really see is the brands has gone from high complication, high prices, down to more basic models, which is at a more market value, market price that people would pay for. That's my opinion. So they discontinue. Of course, the ultra high price, ultra complicated watch, they're still there. Someone would buy that, no problem. But let's say the price of a tourbillon. I mean, you can have a very reasonable price tourbillon, and you can have an ultra expensive price tourbillon. And I believe that the brand these days have actually moved from a more complicated pieces to a simple 3-hand or small second watch, which is more sellable because of the price, if I may answer your question that way.
Yeah, there's, of course, a lot I could respond to there. I think the last statement you made is particularly interesting to me. The idea is that the brands want to make more money, so they sell a simpler product, right? Because the more complicated watches, of course, there are more parts, takes more time to assemble. But one of the things I realize, and I think you will not disagree, is that the desire to buy complicated watches has gone down. I think totally people are afraid of the servicing of them. I think people are afraid of not using them. It used to be that someone, or these brands, you remember, they'd make a really ugly, boring watch, but it had an amazing movement inside. And they thought that was enough.
Of course.
Like, amazing movement. It was like, oh, you wanted a cool case and dial too? Well, why? Is not the amazing movement enough? And so I think they saw all the success of these 3-hand watches, even that's why so many of them take the date out now. So I agree with you. There's cost cutting, and it's probably a bit scandalous for them to charge more for these 3-hand watches, or the same as, a complicated one. But I think that it's really fair to say that our own taste for complicated watches has gone down. And I'm not sure why that is. Is it for the reasons I stated, that they're not very practical and expensive to maintain? Or is there something else I'm missing about why people want to own and wear complicated watches less?
Actually, it's a very interesting topic myself. I think about it from time to time, because I remember when I entered the industry, at that time, it was a lot of brands were using ETA movement, 2824, 2892. And at that time, Mr. Hayek would say, there is no Basel world without an ETA movement. So, and then he's cutting supply on the ETA movements and forcing the brand to invest into making their own movement. And at that time, I gave a lot of praise to brands who have the guts to do it. It's a lot of research and development and a lot of, and if they cut the R&D time down, some parts may go wrong. I remember I bought a Tudor GMT at the time, and then it was a double jump and has to go back to service to be fixed. And so I do pray, at that time, even Mont Blanc, I remember when they first launched the Nicolas Rieussec movement, it was a monopulsar chronograph, not a particularly good looking watch, but I remember that my friend asked me, "Hey, what's the best thing you see in SIHH in Baselworld?" And I told him I was impressed with the Nicolas Rieussec monopulsar chronograph. And you say
it got slightly better looking, right? Slightly better looking.
Yeah, it did. I mean, but my friend told me, my friend asked me, "Are you kidding? You're praising a Mont Blanc, which is okay. Everyone knows what's wrong with Mont Blanc as a brand of watches." But at that time, I was thinking, yeah, it was very, very interesting at the time. They have the guts to do it. And then it got to nowadays. So at that time, even myself, I remember I bought a Zenith Captain Winslow chronograph because it was an annual calendar movement, and it's an El Primero 36,000 VPH movement. And I thought,
that's a great movement.
It's a great watch, and it's an annual calendar watch. But then when I was trying to adjust it, oh my God, my hands got really painful trying to turn it, get it to the right time and date. It is practically difficult to manipulate. Let's put it this way. And maybe one of the reasons why people, think going back to the basic 3-hand or 2-hand watch even is that, the complications are just something which is excess. I mean, Daytona, one of the most popular watch in the world right now. How many times you use the chronograph? How many times? I mean, I haven't done it. I haven't triggered it.
The average is never.
Time. The average is never. There we go. So, so, and then I kind of got to a stage where I'm starting to think why, people, tourbillon, the price of a tourbillon can be extremely high, can be extremely reasonable as well. And then, okay, it's not actually, there's no practical meaning to a tourbillon, from my opinion, because, you move your hand anyway. It's not designed for that in the first place. So I was thinking, why people start to dropping the demands? And if you look at Patek, 5711, 5712, 5726, which at that time, at its peak market price, which watch has the most, value premium is actually 5711.
Yeah.
In my opinion. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And why?
3-hand watch.
Three-hand watch. It's a 3-hand watch. So I think people start to kind of realize that maybe the complication is less useful. Although I love a 5712 because I like to see the power reserve of the watch. I want to wind it up, if the power reserve goes down, but the market tells you otherwise. And
I remember seeing all these crazy watches, and 20 years ago or so, when you and I are really getting into this, they would release a lot of watches that later turned out not to work, right?
True.
And at the time, it was a little bit before the internet was as social when it comes to watch enthusiasts. There was only sort of like very dedicated nerds. But later on, I think people would share their stories, like, all these things started breaking and they wouldn't fix it and all this and that. And I think that over time, people got more and more spooked at buying these watches because it was like they were never user-friendly. Like a 1990s Grand Complication was just like a den of problems. Like minute repeater, gonna break, perpetual calendar, you're gonna set it wrong, it's gonna break, chronograph is gonna get unadjusted and the hand's gonna do something wrong and you're gonna have to fix, like all this stuff like just always happened. And it was a joke that it was just constantly like kind of being repaired. And I guess watch lovers didn't really talk about it. But what I think is important about the modern era and this sort of, I could say environment of practicality is what it means is that people wear these watches. Because those like fragile, minute repeaters, tourbillons that like brands were so proud of, like no one wore that stuff. Like they wore it to like an indoors party to show it off, and then they put it back in a safe, because you and I never saw that stuff anywhere, right? No one was ever wearing it. Now, I really think that even with your super expensive watches, people want to wear it on a daily basis. They want it to work. And I think one of the first brands that figured that out was Gerber Force, because they were always made a big deal of like, yeah, they're well finished and we have the 1 or 2 tourbillons or whatever, but you know, you can drop it on the table and it's not gonna break. And that's what I think is a big part of it, is this greater demand for practicality no matter the price.
I totally agree. Practicality is very important. I mean, as a frequent traveler like yourself and myself, a GMT watch or 2-timer watch would be actually quite ideal, as we want to see the home time and the local time. That's probably the most used and most practical complication when it comes to the use of a wristwatch. But other than that, I mean, perpetual calendars, okay, maybe you can do the lunar time. I mean, the change of 28th or 29th of February to 1st of March, maybe it's cool. And I still remember that when Chopin launched the Perpetual One calendar, that was really cool, because he said they can adjust it forward and backwards. And that was something that was, I think at that time.
That's a big deal.
It's a big deal, because you cannot adjust the perpetual calendar wrongly. Otherwise, it goes back to the factory and they say, sorry, you're not adjusting at the right time. So, you know, it's your problem. It was a big deal.
I wonder how much smartwatches have had an effect on this, because your average smartwatch can offer you insane amounts of functionality, like everything a traditional watch can, plus a lot more things, even if it's not connected to the internet. And I think when people compare it versus traditional watch, they say, what does the traditional watch do for me that the smartwatch does not? And there are, of course, things. One of those things is look cool and look pretty, right? Smartwatch, 9 out of 10 times, is not going to look cool, is not going to look pretty. It's practical and it might look macho, but it's not going to look elegant or pretty in the way that a traditional watch is. So I think that we've just sort of leaned on that. We lean on those things that smartwatches can't do. You know, I think there are more emotional complications which are going to take center stage. In a weird way, the chronograph is, not because of what it does, but because people buy it because it looks nice, right? So I guess it becomes emotional complication. One of my favorite emotional complications is the moon phase. Like, it's just pretty. It just looks nice. It looks pretty. Nice. A calendar with a good layout can look pretty, but that's the only value up above and beyond a smartwatch, because nobody really wants to fiddle with a perpetual calendar. No one does. Like, everybody that does it hates it.
Yeah, it's a lot of pushing and adjusting, blah, blah, blah. But I remember when you talk about smartwatch, I recall having a conversation with the Tesla marketing director when Tesla was launching in Hong Kong at that time. I remember I was wearing a Mugos at that time. And then he was saying to me, he said, hey, do you fear that one of those days that your watch will be less popular, or no people wants your watch anymore and will be replaced by smartwatch? And my answer to him is no. I don't fear that, because the watch, I can pass it on to my daughter and I can service it. And I bet you anything that a smartwatch after 2-3 years, it will be actually a consumable. You know, it's not going to be fixable because the software doesn't upgrade, or whatever reasons the battery died and it cannot be fixed. And it's not built for, the watch itself is not built for service. So at that time he said, okay, I understand you, but you know, this is the new generation. Perhaps the demand for smartwatch will be much higher than a proper wristwatch for us anyway.
I think there is more demand, but I think it's a good thing. I've had this conversation with many people, and I think the evidence is suggesting that people start with a smartwatch, and then if you're wearing a watch that isn't a smartwatch, and it's exactly what I predicted more than 10 years ago, the kid would look at it and be like, hey, you're not wearing a smartwatch. What are you wearing? And then they get curious. And then they see that the non-smartwatch has more fashionability, personality to it. So yes, it's taken a lot of swatches off of people's wrists and Michael Kors and fashion watches, because people were wearing it just to sort of have the time and look cool. the smartwatch with its extra functionality has just won out in that $300 to $400 range. But even below that, with really, inexpensive fun watches and expensive fun watches, you're seeing a huge thing. I mean, look at the Swatch and Omega. I mean, the average demographic is the exact person who that same person would have thought would not care about watches and would only wear smartwatches, right? Like, that's the person they were thinking about, like that guy exactly. Yet they're all about this thing and they can barely explain to you why.
Correct. At the end of the day, if you have the pattern of putting something on the wrist, regardless it's a smartwatch or a wristwatch or a mechanical watch or whatever, it's actually quite a good thing, I think. At the end of the day, you will grow and you would look into something which for us will be a mechanical watch or a luxury watch even, And I feel that it's not a bad thing. And I have like senior friends who actually wear on the right side a smartwatch just to have the blood pressure, blood pulses, blah, 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 readings, and a proper watch on their wrist.
When you see that on someone, I have to admit, I'm still on the fence how I feel about it. I'm glad people double wrist it, so to say. But from a coolness perspective, I have yet to see it and be like, I want to be like that guy. I've seen it, young guys, old guys, rich guys, poor guys. I've seen a lot of people try it. I'm just not sure anyone's quite figured out how to do it. What do you think? What are your initial impressions when you see a guy, especially a guy in a suit, wearing a smartwatch on one wrist and a traditional watch on the other? Are you proud I Are you like, boy, I wish that would work better? What are you thinking?
Well, I don't have a particular strong feeling, but I think, they have to wear a smartwatch for a particular reason. Whether it's work related, where they don't want to miss a message because sometimes the phone doesn't vibrate and they vibrate on the wrist, double vibration to see a message, or they're health conscious because they want to look out for their health figures, or there's a particular way of using them. At the same time, I'm glad that they are actually risk aware of something that they like on the wrist, which is the wristwatch. And, practically for gentlemen, very rarely we would wear something which is glamorous in terms of what is luxury. A lady could wear a ring, could wear earrings or necklace. For us as a gents, I think, a wristwatch is very important. That's just my thinking.
Now, going back to Hong Kong, obviously there's been a reduction in the number of watches sold to tourists, and there's less disposable income, so there's less people buying watches. But Hong Kong has always had a very dedicated, very strong group of people who live there that love watches. And one of the reasons, and again, this sounds funny to people, but it's not, is when you don't have a lot of space and you want to collect something expensive, it can't be cars because you don't have any place to put them. But watches, not very big, and you can do that. So in a place like Hong Kong, watches have been a very appealing thing to sort of collect. So my question is, right now, because Hong Kong is a dynamic market, and of course they will always love Rolex, but what else do they like right now? Tastes come and go, and they definitely fluctuate, and that's what I love about this hobby. And again, it's been a few years since I've been there. You're obviously interacting with the peers more often than me. What are people into these days? Or maybe what are they not into? We've already discussed they're not so much into complications, but tell me more.
Well, first of all, I think the steel-steel combination has worked quite well.
Steel-steel?
Steel combination has worked.
Okay.
Steel case and then steel bracelet. That's what I mean as a steel. I call it steel. Has worked quite well for the past three years, I would say. In fact, it all started with the demand of Patek on of course, Nautilus, and then it comes to Royal Oak, and then of course then Rolex, and then we exclude the big four. We call it Richard Mille. We exclude that completely because that's a different world altogether. And
they don't have any steel at all.
No, titanium. Okay, but I'm saying that for the taste of steel, actually, it has worked really, really well. And what has that bring? It has brought into even GP or L'Oriental, and then Polo for Piaget. Even I see Quorum Admirals Club being, people asking for it. To me, it was a little bit of a surprise that they come back.
That's shocking.
I don't want to be critical on the brands, but people actually look.
No, because they haven't marketed in forever.
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised at that time, but anyway, they're still coming. And then, of course, come back very strongly is the Tonda Parmigiani. And then I actually appreciate Parmigiani movement a lot myself.
Yeah, they're pretty.
They're pretty. Just in the movement, it has a very good factory, and I always talk to watch collectors. Look, this is, to me, the finishing and the complication they put in super impressive to me. And
well, they are for sale.
The company, yeah. But at the same time, I would say, for Parmigiani, if I have to be critical, the bracelet can improve. The bezel can improve, and otherwise is okay. That's for me, that's a personal taste issue. But that has worked quite well. And then look what happens to Titsu and all the Swatch Group less expensive brands. They go into the steel market as well. And of course, the colors, the pattern. I remember, at that time when I entered, chocolate dial was important. Then it comes to the blue, the green, and the complication look for salmon. I'm quite a well predictor for this type of dial colors. I looked into it and I can tell which one is actually going. But what is actually demanding these days? I mean, it's very hard to tell. And I have watch collectors which are shifted away from the mainstream brands into the independent, which I want to talk to you a little bit about. Into brands like Chapad. Of course, Epigeon always, done quite well in terms of in the collector's eyes. It still is at the moment, but although the market price, I would say the real market price has dropped a little bit. That's still quite popular. But again, as you and I discussed, the complicated watches have just fell off. Not many people really want it, but a very nice practical steel watch at the moment is still very much the taste of an average watch person, in my opinion. And that's why I see Vacheron, they launched the 222 in steel, super well received, in my opinion.
What do the brands need to do to be popular in Hong Kong? Is it just be a noteworthy brand? I know a lot of brands would come and have events, and the designers, the managers, the CEOs, the founders will come out and personally show the watches off to people. Does Hong Kong still get that type of attention? You sort of hinted at maybe not, because Chengdu had the Omega watches before Hong Kong, which is a slight, right? Like if I were you, I'd be like, oh, what's up? That sucks. Yeah. We used to have all everything first. But what is the strategy to get the local collectors interested? Because it seems very brand-based right now.
Yeah, it's still very brand-based. I mean, the LVMH brands like Hublot recently, Julian, the new CEO, just been around to Hong Kong, Shanghai, travel quite a bit and doing events there. That's Hublot style. Everyone knows them and loves them to have big events. And they're, of course, the what you call soccer we call football in Hong Kong, the English Premier League being the official timekeeper, actually quite well received in worldwide from peoples and know the brand. They do. I mean, the CEOs do come around to Hong Kong these days. They still come. It's still an important market to be there, but the attention they have, maybe what they need to do is it's very hard to say at the moment, because the demand has been weak. And, as I mentioned to you before the start of the recording, the indie brands, before 2-3 years ago, people pay deposit. And at the time when I was at the show in 23, returning deposit because they don't want to make as much. And now with the watches coming in, and suddenly they find it hard to sell. And I found it surprising. So what do they really need to do is very difficult to tell at the moment. I've been having conversation with some marketing director of particular brands that I don't actually want to name at the moment, but telling me that 25 is not a year they're really looking into. It has to be, they try to survive 25 in order to think of a better 26 at the moment. So it's very hard.
And these are the smaller independent brands?
No, the brand that talks about 25 and 26 really is actually a big brand.
Okay.
big brand. So
I've noticed something interesting that may be relevant in this situation. You're talking about some of the sort of weak demand for the independents, the big brands we'll get to. And the independents, at least in the modern sense, since the year 2000 and beyond, have existed because of sort of peripheral demand created that the Rolexes of the world cannot all absorb, right? Whether you're bored of Rolex or you want to spend more than Rolex or you can't get a Rolex, that's where a lot of these other brands come in. They're also the more artisanal, like, Rolex, I just use them a lot because it's obviously a popular one. A bit of a faceless corporation. Maybe today Mr. DeFore speaks a little bit more than before, but arguably Rolex is a name more than a particular person. Yeah. And people like the personability of being able to speak to the designer. That's a nice thing. But the popularity of the independents has always existed as riding on the coattails of the big brands. So I think it's fair to extrapolate, and I'd love your thoughts, that when you see weakness in the independents, it's usually predicated by weakness amongst the big brands. Meaning when there is good demand and success for the big brands, there will also tend to be for the independents, but the independents themselves are not strong enough to create demand, to create a market, create interest without the help of those larger brands. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would agree. I remember in 21, 22, or even 23 at that time, I think even brands like Chapet or I would say Moser, they do still case and steal. And then perhaps it's because the big brands are already into it. So they make something like that, in my opinion. Even Cyrus, they made a steel bracelet for their watches, which to me was a little bit unusual, not quite their style. So you're right. They are actually riding on the, if the traditional big brands are doing well. And sometimes they found that it's difficult to get even, Vacheron overseas. You cannot get. Then they look into the independent, which is offering something freehand, nice finish, that type of watch, which Chapet fits the category at that time. So I would agree on that. When the brands, the bigger brands start to do less well, and then the demand would for the indies also would drop in that way. I would agree to that, yes.
I think it's like the film industry, that the art movies, the independent films as we called it, they only existed because the theaters and the production companies and the actors and all that stuff was there for the big Hollywood blockbusters. And that people on their extra time or where they got sick of that would maybe do like an independent movie and they would have a chance. But the industry could not thrive or even exist with just the smaller independent films. And I think that it's a very good analogy.
Oh yeah, I totally agree.
Now, is there a risk? I think the answer is actually yes. I just want to know how big of a risk you think it is that over the next several years, as the big brands continue to wander in the wilderness, waiting for the year to come back, just surviving, what is the risk of some of these small brands dying? We know that brands can die. Some of them have died and already come back in a few years. I think it's so funny how fast brands die and then come back. Or like Breva coming back. Really? Like, was it just available?
Came back and
several times.
Yeah.
So
I guess died a few times.
Yeah. Should we even be surprised when brands die? Should we really lament it? I mean, I guess what is the mortality rate in your opinion for watch brands these days?
I would say actually to me the smaller indies will be at a very vulnerable position because I heard during COVID the Swiss suppliers a lot of them went out of business, and then there are only few suppliers that can supply certain parts for the indies to work, and in that case, if they invest heavily because of the demand at that time, or the pre-orders at that time, and then all of a sudden, the demand has just gone flat, then it's very hard for them to survive in that way. And although I hate to see a brand go away because, recently Buhura just went out And I found that it's a bit of a shame. I look at the brand and at that, when I entered the industry, it is a shame because it was one of a good brands, and they have sponsored a lot of nice events in Hong Kong as well. So I found that, it's a real shame that they decided to call it a day, and it's very vulnerable to me.
Is that for a consumer a bad thing? Because there's so many watches. I wonder if a few years of less watches might be good.
I think it's not. It's actually a bad thing because even the stronger independent brands would have the impression to the customers to think that one day something may happen to the brand. I mean, Roma Jerome, for example, they went away in a very short notice of time. I recall at that time, and it wasn't a very bad time at that time as well for Roma Jerome. It suddenly just declared it's finished, and it left a very bad impression on the potential buyer of these watches or independent watches. Because what happens if one day they decided to call it a day, and what happens to if they were working on some own movements? Would they be serviceable? Would a watchmaker be able to do something about the watches they purchase? Or would the value of my watches just drop to zero because the brand don't exist anymore? I fear the same for Buhara, for instance, for now. They were great watches. They're making very good chronograph. They make good tourbillons. They make good complicated watches. And
I agree.
What happens to the value?
But is it surprising to you, knowing about Rolex buying the parent company and all that? Like, is it surprising to you? I was not surprised by it at all. I was sad, like you, because I also like them, but I just wasn't surprised.
For me, it was it's a yes and no, because actually Tudor, one of their beloved brothers of Rolex, is not doing very well as well, in my opinion.
Which is surprising. I can't necessarily explain that easily.
Well, actually, I look into that question, and I actually asked a very friendly friend of mine who is a retailer for Tudor. And
what did they have to say?
I said to him, look, listen, they have nice celebrities. They have their own movement. Price is not expensive. So the equation is, to me, works 100%. And then I asked him, and then he told, brilliant. And I asked him, he said his Tudor sales dropped 50-60% for
wow, 50-60%.
Yes, massive. And then they were saying to me, look, the treatment of I don't know how to put it in a nicer way, but a bundle purchase is something that they are relying on at that time for Rolex, Tudor, and I don't think it's for Buhara myself, but bundle purchase was the problem. When you want to buy a very nice, very hot Rolex, you're going to buy a number of Tudors, bundle purchase, which is in the luxury industry is not actually a surprising move, but when things got really hot, bundle purchase is something. And if you bundle purchase, including a Tudor, then people will say, okay, it's not actually something that I wanted to buy, but I have to buy. And what did they do with the watch? Either they give it away or they sell it cheap to recoup the costs.
So which one of those things did they do? Did they give them away? Because it seems like once it's in your store, because they're nice designs, because they're a good price, they would be easy to sell. So I think that's what I didn't understand is how in the places that they sold, they were still so uncompetitive.
Well, as you've been to Hong Kong a number of times, you know that there are shops that use the brand secondary shops or parallel shops. I would say all they care is turnover. Selling the watches is quickly invest and then make the percentage and then just go. And then that's what happens. I think if I want to buy a very nice Rolex at that time, maybe the retail is, let's say, let's make it easy, $10,000, let's say, okay. And then, but the market price is 20 or 23 or 25,000, Okay, let's say is that crazy that time? And then I bought it for 10,000, and then I got to buy 3,000 to 4,000 worth of, let's say, Tudor at that time. So I would like to say that I would like to recoup my investment on Tudor. I don't mind selling at a loss, but means I'm buying the nice watch $10,000 at a slightly more expensive rate. So I would get rid of my Tudor at a cheaper price to the parallel shop, which would buy. They would buy, and then they would set it on, and it will not be at the Tudor's retail price for sure. Then I think that is the damaging factor. And another reason why Tudor cannot take off.
Okay, so I'm thinking about this, and maybe I'm taking it like one step further. Mm-hmm. But what I'm sort of hearing is this. Tudor did a really good job marketing to watch enthusiasts, but did a not so good job marketing to your sort of average watch lover, the type of person that would sort of know Rolex. Mm-hmm. Now, your watch enthusiast has a lot of habits. And one of those habits is being trained to not necessarily buy new.
Yeah.
So Tudor did really well in appealing to people who have a habit of not buying new watches, essentially.
Or buying Tudor watches they don't care about the retail. They know that the market price is slightly cheaper. I should never pay retail for a Tudor watch.
Well, they want a discount, which means they're not paying retail. They're definitely not paying over retail, but they don't even want to pay retail. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this. I'm one of these people. I got accustomed to discounts. I'm not just going to pay retail because I know I don't need to. So Tudor did its job in telling your sophisticated, savvy, mature watch lover, like, hey, guys, we got something really good. But even though they have some of those great ambassadors, I laugh about Lady Gaga. I didn't think she was great. David Beckham's pretty good. I couldn't name all the other ones.
Jay Chou from Taiwanese singer, massive, really good.
Okay,
really good.
Okay, that guy. And despite that, awareness, it didn't really take off. And that's an interesting question of why. I have some answers as to why I think it is. I think they just didn't do enough marketing or storytelling. But it was, I think, a very strong lesson of it's like, hey, you can't just be the baby sibling of Rolex. You can't just have a good watch at a good price. You can't even be just nice. You've got to be something deeper to a consumer. Otherwise, they won't care. And for me, that's the lesson.
Well, in my opinion, they actually try to do something deeper because they have the Matis certificate watch. Okay, they invest into making that watch.
That's too deep, Alfred.
Yeah, okay. For that price, yes, it's too deep. They have their own movement. No, they also exchange technology with brightening.
Who understands that? Other than you and me, who understands Metis? Well, I like this watch. I like because when I see master chronometer on this watch, to me it's an FU to Omega. Okay, and I find that amusing.
Yeah, I agree. Well, for me, I always explain Matis to friends that anti-magnetic, it's not going to be affected. That's
a simple way of saying it.
Yeah, it's a simple way because magnets are everywhere. There's just anti-magnetic watch. There you go. There's no problem with if you have your wallets or ladies' purse or whatever with iPads, with magnets, then your watch will not be affected, and it's supposed to be very accurate. But I always have a problem with Matis myself, regardless whether it's Omega or Tudor. When you take the watch to a local service for the Matis watch, it comes out it's not Matis anymore. They won't pass Matis for you. No, I asked this question 2 times. I asked Omega and I asked
What does that
Tudor.
mean? It won't pass because they won't do it, or something changes about the watch?
Well, because the watchmaker opened the watch in theory, you should go through all the Matis test, right? Before giving it back to you. They don't do that.
Oh, so like retesting it.
Yeah.
Oh, if you see the facility in Switzerland, they're not going to replicate that nonsense.
No, but in that case, your Matis has only gone as far as before you surface it the first time, right?
Yeah, but the watch is still anti-magnetic, right?
True, but whether it has the accuracy, to the level that Matis says.
But you can test it.
Yeah, but test is myself. But once the official answer is from, after coming out of service, it's not Matis anymore.
You want the piece of paper. I get it.
Not the piece of paper, but the guarantee of the quality, you know. Actually, to be honest, I asked Quality Fleury that question as well. And I recorded it's not when it comes up from the service. From the service center.
You know who's on this topic is just very relevant right now. Uh-huh. I just got an email from Kosk.
Okay.
Kosk now wants to start doing a B2C marketing rather than just B2B. Meaning Kosk, I guess, wants to tell, your average watch lover that Kosk is cool. Mm-hmm. I don't know exactly what they're going to say. They're a bit behind now, but that's kind of funny that there's all these competitors to Kosk, and Kosk just got really lazy, and they're like, "Oh, damn, we're not cool anymore."
Yeah. I mean, Kosk seems to be like the basic right now, right?
You know what I learned recently, which I guess it made sense, but if you are not a Swiss-made brand, Kosk will not accept you for chronometer testing. You have to be a Swiss-made company.
Yeah, I think it's one of the criteria. Yes, you're right.
I didn't realize that. It seems a bit snooty, right?
Well, yeah. But it's like Patek telling you they have Patek certificate, PP sealed. And I remember when they launched it, I asked them, I said, listen, can other brands qualify for PP seal? They said, yeah, absolutely. Try me. And I was thinking, who has the guts to do that?
I mean, yeah, but the thing is okay, it's supposed to be the Swiss quality control. Mm. And it doesn't matter what you're quality controlling. The quality control is a process with Swiss machines in Switzerland. That should be enough. To say we won't test things that haven't been built in Switzerland, and then again, as you know, Swiss made is built-ish in Switzerland, right? So I think that it's a protectionist policy that would not fly in most places. Because you can still have a high quality testing of a non-Swiss thing, right? That's doable.
You can.
It's not like a scandal. I don't really care. It's just funny because you see it on a certain number of watches and not on others. And there's all these other watches that say within, chronometry range or whatever. It's like, why don't you just get it chronometer certified? And then you realize, they won't even take it. It's not that expensive. It's what is it, like $100, $200 less if it's a volume to get it recertified? It's not too much.
Something like that. It's not too much. It's a mass testing thing. I don't think it costs that much to do it. No, absolutely not.
So let me ask you this as a collector who loves these things. Would you pay an extra fee to have some third party test your watches after their service to make sure they're all water resistant and accurate and all that stuff? And if so, how much would you pay for that?
Well, to be honest, it's all calculated. If I go back to the official service center, it should be all covered by them.
Oh, it should, but they don't. We know that.
If they don't, then maybe
they all suck at it.
They all suck at it. But in my opinion, I would like to have an accurate watch and anti-magnetic, as you said. But whether I'm talking about when I ask those questions, I'm asking on behalf of the really, really geek ones. Geeky watch collectors. So I'm not, to be honest, I'm not that bothered myself. As long as the watch is running at a very reasonable accuracy, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with it.
We're basically out of time, but I have one more question I want to run by you. And that is the last 20 or 25 years, the watch enthusiast nerd has had a very outsized role. Even though they haven't been the people buying all the watches, watch brands have done a lot of things to make them happy, have listened to their feedback. They have really had a big impact on the industry. But more recently, brands are like, wait a minute, we need to sell to more people, or these guys are hard to sell to, or they're demanding. I guess the question is, moving forward, what role or maybe lack of role do you think the ultra nerd will have in the industry? Even if they're not necessarily going to be the biggest buying class, what do you think their importance will be? And will it be similar to that of the recent past?
Well, it's a very complicated question to ask, but, as far as I understand that, as a watch collector, watch lover, I think the brands need to educate them in a way to realize the craftsmanship and also the research and development into the watch. That needs to be communicated super well And that is what we do as a traditional, so-called traditional watch media at that time, whether I was print, you were with aBlogtoWatch, a very professional way of communicating. The reason why I said that is as follows, because people start to realize that, at that time, Nautilus always goes up, the sports models always goes up. So I'm even though I don't know anything about watches, I should go in to buy them because I think they retain value, if not they appreciate value. And to me, actually, as a consumer of the watch, it's not quite right. It's not quite right. And I felt that the brands should really let people understand that this watch has such a story behind, or such a legacy behind, or so much research into it, and letting people know, because you and I probably have a very long history of collecting watches, buying and selling watches. And at that time, we buy watches for certain reasons. For example, I bought a Captain Winslow because I thought that at that time it was a great complication, value for money, very good, and it's kind of cool. I like the movement, and I appreciate the work that has been put into the watch, and that's why I bought it. But it's not quite the case at the moment. A lot of average watch buyer right now who has the money to buy watches, they don't look at it that way, unfortunately, and I find that a bit of a shame. And you and I have a trilogy of, collecting watches at different time, at different trend and different reasons. And that's a real something that we can put on our CV to call ourselves a watch expert, so-called watch expert and watch enthusiast. And that's something that I think the brand should really communicate. And they've done that in the past, but because the market has been overwhelmed at that time, they can't make more watches to sell to the people, and then the demand gone up, the market value has gone up, and I think that is something that is really lacking behind, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. That we're a qualified opinion. We give brands feedback that they don't really receive from other groups, that they're oftentimes not able to give themselves. Like, we do a lot of the quality control for them. We do a lot of the error testing.
Of course.
We're an important, almost a quality control, if you will, right? That's organization. In addition to being a customer set. So there's a lot of values of interacting with us because we provide a valuable informational service, whether we are, as you said, professional media or someone who just buys a lot and has a strong opinion. And either way, we're helping these companies make better products, probably communicate better overall, appeal to people better, and see where some of their weaknesses. They need to listen, of course, but the feedback loop we give them is one that they don't have without us. And as far as you and I know, they can't get anywhere else. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Alfred, we're out of time. Where can people learn more about you on the internet?
I'll be back on aBlogtoWatch writing very soon. People can see me. I'll be more visible, and I'm always a welcoming figure to your family, I hope.
I love to hear that. Thank you, everyone. This has been the Superlative Podcast interview with Alfred Lung. Alfred, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ariel. It's been a great pleasure to be here.